Hello and welcome to another episode of
Absolute Game Off.
Nerd! I guess I should say not necessarily episode, but another video, as this is not one of our interviews. But here we are again. Mike and I from Lunch Money Comics are here to talk about episode 4. Saying episode 4 just makes me kind of sad because now we're halfway through season 2. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, now you put it that way, that does kind of bum me out. Yeah, but I mean, this is an episode I think we definitely expected to have in episode 4. We knew it was definitely this season, and it did not disappoint.
No, it did not. It did not disappoint. And we're definitely gonna, we're coming up to it. I heard somewhere that they were saying that this rivals the Battle of the Bastards, which I was like, what? I think this was a little different. We'll get into the battle in a little bit. I think there's a lot to go through first because I actually didn't realize they'd go through so much stuff prior to, the battle. I thought it was going to be, but they actually did quite a bit. But high level, just general thoughts overall.
I mean, again, the quality. I mean, I know we're the golden age of television. I feel like we extend it constantly, right? It used to be back in the 2000s, and now it just keeps getting better. I mean, we shouldn't really be surprised anymore when they have a budget this big and they can pull off these big, shows. But man, I mean, it's a movie. It looks just as good as a movie, and they just the way they plotted it out, and I mean, the whole thing was great. Yeah, the whole thing was great. I am curious. It's weird from being like a book reader standpoint, knowing the story so well. I did talk to my wife who hasn't been, and it was interesting. I'd like to see more people. I haven't listened to anything yet. I haven't watched online other people's reactions of this. So I think for me, it was amazing. It didn't disappoint, but I don't know if I'm far enough away from it to look at it as a standalone, like where it's placed in, TV nowadays is. I thought it was pretty spectacular. Curious what other people think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. The execution was just flawless. Like I loved every bit of it. But yeah, let's kind of go through the details. Like I said, I actually, as I told you before, I made some notes this time of what I wanted to make sure we talked about some of the scenes and things like that, so we didn't forget.
We don't just ramble like we always do.
Yeah, like we don't ramble.
Anyone who's watched the previous episodes, what ends up happening is we shut the camera off and then we go, "Oh, we didn't talk about this or this or this," and we forget. So
yeah,
keep us on track.
Anyway, so we open up and we're back at Harrenhal. Damon is still, hallucinating, having these dreams, and I love every second of this. I think it's great, just to kind of see him all disoriented, especially because he's like this guy that thinks he's like this alpha male and always just like no one's gonna top me, and here he is just discombobulated. I love it.
Right. I mean, it was funny though. As soon as it started with that, and I like that stuff, just like you. My wife's like, I don't like this stuff. That's the first thing she said. She's like, I don't really like the supernatural aspect. We do get to meet Alice Rivers though, which was pretty cool. I think she did a great job. Definitely weird and wacky.
Have you, real quick, have you seen? And it just is by chance, I think, or they specifically can't. Have you seen the image of Alice Rivers from the illustrated pictures that they have from years ago?
Probably.
Dude, the actress that they cast is identical to Alice. Cool. I mean, just a phenomenal cast.
She was in Perry Mason. She was in that show. I remember.
Oh, okay. But I love that scene too, though. Especially when, I mean, again, thinking of Damon, who thinks he's the sharpest sword in Westeros. No one's got an angle on him, and she just reads him like a book. I mean, quarreling with your wife. You're here. You take a castle. You don't even send a raven. I loved it.
Yeah, she figures out exactly everything he's about. That he still has resentment for not having the crown, and yeah, it was perfect. Yep, in the same place that you lost your crown, and all this cool. I mean, it was great. It was fantastic.
Yeah. I also just loved this scene where he decapitated the young Rhaenyra. That was really cool.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was just really great too, how it had him drink that potion, whatever it is that she concocted.
Oh yeah.
And then the next scene is him holding the cup, and you didn't realize that they it's the next day, and he doesn't know.
Yeah, halfway through the next day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked what he was like. What can I do for you? And he's like, you summoned me here.
Right. And then he sees the serving. Was that Alice Rivers as a serving woman, or was it someone else?
No, it was a random serving woman, but he saw his old wife.
Right. He looks like his wife. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. So then from there, we go to Alicent getting the moon tea. And actually, it's kind of funny. I saw from the earlier episode, it was maybe episode 1 or 2 from listening to some podcast. Someone was like, was she holding her, kind of back or kind of rubbing her belly as if she was intubated? She was like pregnant. And then when that came through, I was like, oh, here we go. So
that was, I mean, no, shouldn't really be a surprise. I like the fact that Laris comes in and, just, she says she indulged too much into dinner. It's like, oh, you did indulge.
Yeah. And I also love that he's like, I believe it's a sin to not indulge in our appetite.
Exactly. I thought we were going to get another foot scene, but it didn't play out. So,
yeah, he is. I mean, he's obviously like the Varys of this show. I think he's awesome in his role.
He is good. What is funny about him? A lot of people think he's like kind of slimy and stuff. I actually think he's kind of pretty level-headed compared to a lot of the other sort of sneaky spy masters and stuff we've seen in Game of Thrones. He's some people say he's kind of like Littlefinger and Varys combined. I think he's clearly more rational than either of them. I think, and reasonable. So yeah, I think the actor does a great job too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that scene when they're talking in the council meeting with Aegon, and they're like, they took your castle. He's like, yeah, but it means nothing, and it's gonna take them longer to do anything with it. And I already have the charge of all the gold that's involved with that castle.
That was the line he said, that castle's more crippled than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that council scene, I loved it. Like when Aemon started speaking Valyrian to Aegon.
Yes.
I mean, clearly he's still pissed off of like that scene at the brothel last week. Obviously, probably childhood memories. Just like, oh, you think you're a hot shit, Aegon? Let me just put you in your place. I loved when he's like, you're busy naming your lick spittles to the King's Guard and things like that. Meanwhile, he's like, yeah, Cole and I are just text messaging here about like what we're doing in the battle.
Exactly. And the best part about that, the thing that just encapsulates, again, the entire relationship between the two of them and also the competence of them, Aemon's just like rattling off High Valyrian, no problem. And then all, Aegon can do is he responds in just like terrible grammar and just like no one else knows it except for the two of them. It's like one of them is studied, one of them is not. One of them is a military genius, one is not. One's a warrior, one is, it clearly just drives the home that Aemon knows he'd be the better king. He knows it, and it's all encapsulated in that one scene. I thought that was so cleverly done as everyone else in the room just watches this happen. It's so cool.
Yeah. And then you kind of go from that, and I love the transition. And then so now we have Aegon goes back to his chambers, and Alicent is there. She's looking for Viserys's books, and he's like, "Oh, I had to move." And she's like, "Oh, you didn't think you could learn anything from the thousands of years of wisdom there?" And I just love that line. She's like, "Just because you think you're king, that imbues you with wisdom?"
Yes.
And he's like, "Well, what would you have me do?" And she's like, "Nothing." Like,
that's
we've
harsh.
got this.
Yeah, she basically says he wants to feel like he can do something, but he's surrounded by people who are clearly better at this than him. And, she said, you don't understand the sacrifices that were made to put you on that throne. But the most damning thing was, she said, regarding all the other people, they're like, all those people earned their role at that seat, implying that he did not. And then finally, she drops that little truth nugget. It was probably the worst thing that Aegon could have heard at that moment was, you're useless. Do nothing. Just sit there and shut up. And that's the last thing he wanted to hear.
Yeah. I thought it was fantastic. So from there we go now back to Dragonstone, and you have Rhaenyra's council. I didn't really think about it last week when she went to King's Landing. I didn't realize she didn't tell
no one knew.
Anyone, and so it was a big secret. So I do think in terms of that, in terms of like ruling or leadership or governance, I think Rhaenyra made an error in not either appointing Rhaenys hand of the king or hand of the queen, excuse me, or anyone, right? Just someone there to like take charge. Everyone there is just like bickering.
Right.
But anyway, she comes in and I thought Jace was getting a little pissy with her. Like, where have you been? What are you doing? Like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because he's probably been dealing with the squabbling and stuff, behind the scenes. It's been going on presumably for like weeks, right? Or a couple days at least. So yeah, he was really short with his mom, which is actually, that was a little different surprise. You haven't seen that from him at all. But she basically comes back and affirms, yep, no, now I know for sure this is the right way to go. We're going to war. And it seems like that appeases everybody at that point in time.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And then so from there, you do get, as like the kind of battle revs up, you get that kind of scene where she starts telling Jace, which was really cool. I thought, like, sharing with him the song of
Yes.
Ice and Fire as they kind of revved up the battle.
Right.
Anyway, so now speaking of the battle, the reason why, like, when I heard, like, oh, this is going to be on par with Battle of the Battle, I was really like, how? Like, they don't really have a army of men, like,
Right.
essentially formed up yet. And again, like, when you think about it too, like, it wasn't necessarily a battle because there wasn't another army, right? It was more
Right.
like they were going to lay siege, and then the dragon, like,
Yeah.
but I thought the execution of it all was
Yeah.
fantastic.
I think it's a tough comparison again because they're different battles. I know that people say, "Oh, they're a battle." Compare them to each other, maybe in terms of kind of like the spectacle. But the biggest difference is the Battle of the Bastards was an entire episode, and it was, never mind the fact that you don't have dragons. It's on the ground. It could have been any fantasy or historical kind of thing, but it's an entire episode pretty much, and all the moving parts to do that episode. I don't think you can really duplicate that very easily. So I don't think that's a very favorable comparison.
Agreed.
I would say maybe in the results in the end, kind of is. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough comparison. The Battle of the Bastards is still like
It's
an
epic.
A+++ in terms of an hour of television in my life. Yeah, that was pretty insane. So
Yeah. It was so actually I should also mention this first off, leading up, and I guess we even see it in the battle. I really enjoy them showing the relationship between Ryder and Dragon. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you have that scene where Aegon gets drunk. He's like, "Fuck this! I'm not gonna do nothing. I'm gonna go join the fight," and he goes to the Dragon Pit, and like Sunfire essentially is like comes up smiling. He like nuzzles
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
and then you have that scene with Rhaenys being like, "Oh, it's to battle again, old girl," and like
Right.
leans her head in. Like, it's very. I really enjoy kind of seeing those little details.
And they could have, again, think about what they did with Game of Thrones in the early seasons with the direwolves. Like, we don't have the
Yeah.
budget. They're just not in this. When you read the stories, these dragons are not only these epic beasts, these myths of, legend, but they have personalities. They all have nicknames. And, when they talk about them in the same breath as their riders. They are characters in their own right. I was wondering if they would just be nameless dragon mounts or if they would have some personality. And they do have personality. They have distinct looks about them, and they really play up the rider to the dragon, and that's going to matter later when we see there's going to be more dragon riders that people haven't been introduced yet, that we haven't really been introduced to yet, and how the connection between rider and dragon matters a lot. So I think that they're doing a really wise thing, and I know I'm getting ahead, but in that battle, there's a couple of dragons get badly injured or killed, and my wife actually reacted more to that than the people. So, oh no, because it's like, it's an animal, like people have a soft spot, and it's a fictional animal. It's make believe.
It's just like in the Blood and Cheese, people were most upset when he kicked the dog.
Yeah. I did read real quick. Do you see that George R. R. Martin thought that was genius?
The kicking of the dog?
Like, having the dog at all. He's like, his Blood and Cheese, like, no, he's like, they're not, I didn't think of the dog or anything like that. And the fact they put the dog in there and he kicks the dog, it makes you hate Cheese even more. But at the end, then the dog is looking at his master hanging, and it realized, like, that's the dog's only friend, and it says a lot. Like, it did a lot more for that character, just adding a little scrappy dog. And George said that was great. He thought it was one of the best changes or additions to the show.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the changes like they make have been really good in the sense that, like, again, for those that don't read, the Dance of the Dragons really takes place in 3 books, right? Fire and Blood. It's the novella in that, like, Dangerous Woman compilations, and then there's a piece of it in the World book, which is not by George, it's by his 2 like top super fans. And in all 3 of them, it's essentially a retelling by a Maester or Septon or Mushroom, for example. And with that, all you get is the events that took place. You don't get any context. You don't get any character traits and details of, like, for example, like, we've grown to love Rhaenys, and obviously her demise is in this episode. But in the books, it's just like Rhaenys came, Rhaenys fought, and then Rhaenys died. And that was kind of it. Whereas, like, now you actually feel the emotion behind it. But even before that, I thought it was really cool how they stage everything. So I was listening to the after episode podcast, and they had Alan Taylor, the director, who's obviously done lots of big episodes. And he was talking about him and the storyboard artist. Again, I don't really know a lot about how films are made, but he was talking about how when they were storyboarding, him and the storyboard artists were like looking at ways of how are they going to frame these dragons fighting. And he mentioned that like one of them found like a video or something on when birds of prey attack other birds of prey. Like if one's flying and another comes at them, they'll usually like kind of turn. So they go talon to talon and kind of get entangled.
Yeah.
And so he's like, that's what he did with the dragons. And I was like, oh, that's cool to like hear that. And like, I thought it worked great. I thought the dragon on dragon fighting was sick.
My favorite part, honestly, as cool as it was seeing them in the air, when they did a couple of those perspective shots of people on the ground, one, you're getting the size. When Vhagar comes out, you're like, wow, that's huge. But then when they're looking way up, like the whole battlefield, the whole battle stops. Both sides just stop and look up. And they film them really high. I thought that was so clever. Like, it would have been really easy to be like, oh, he's a CG spectacle. We see them flying around. But you need to see it from the standpoint of people. Because one of the things I heard they wanted to really show in this battle, it's the first time we see the dragons really fighting. They are weapons of mass destruction. They are bringing a nuclear bomb, right? They are the worst of the worst. There's a reason why Rhaenyra didn't want to loose the dragons yet. And you see why. So from everyone else standing around, nothing else matters. The catapults, scorpions, siege towers, none of that matters. You just got to look up because when they come back down, you just see what they do for destruction. I thought that was so cool to see from a regular soldier standpoint.
Yeah, and even Alex even said like when Vhagar hits the ground, like we've tried like these are nuclear bombs, like, and I wanted to have the effect of like what happens when a nuclear bomb hits the earth. I thought that was really cool, and I also just love the little detail. It's like right before they like kind of turn to go talon to talon, you have Rhaenys like add that extra strap, like that was really cool. I also loved that when one of the dragons was wounded and it bled.
Yeah.
Like the steaming hot blood, like boiled the men on the ground that got hit, like all that stuff. I was like, oh, it's just
so many clever little things like that. Yeah. Right. And again, we don't know. We've never seen dragons like that before. So it's like it's neat to throw that stuff in. You're like, oh, that makes sense. You know, that's really neat.
And then I guess if we can talk real quick on, or not real quick, but spend a few minutes on a change to the books. So in the books, it is a trap set by Cole and Aemon as it was here, where they had Vhagar, but in the books, it was both Vhagar and Sunfire. Like they were planned together. The show has added this new element of like Aegon getting upset and like making a rash decision to join the fight, which kind of throws Cole and Aemon's plans a little bit on its ass. But I think that's a great change, personally.
And it makes sense. Like there's there's no way they risk Aegon's life, right? Even in the story, when you read it, like why was Aegon there at all? Like it makes no sense that he'd be there.
It'd be similar to like the council scene where Rhaenyra is like, I'll go. It's like, no, you can't go.
That's exactly it, right? It doesn't make any sense. And to the same point, where we don't know in the books exactly what happened. You're right. Even if you were to have retell what you just watched 100 years later, you would say, oh, they were both there. They both fought. Just like Criston Cole said, your king is here. Fight for him. He was making do like the best he could with the fact that the plan just changed. No one would actually know it wasn't the plan except for really Criston and Aemon, right? So so it's fine. It still works with the story as told, but it just adds extra layer, which honestly makes sense. If you read it in the story, like he shouldn't have been there. Clearly a smaller dragon than Meleys too.
As much as we hate on Criston Cole, I thought they like wrote it brilliant where he like he's like, what am I gonna do? And he's like, oh, your king is here. You can't be afraid now. If he's here to support us, like we got to be all in on this. Like that was a great turn.
And he wasn't telling Gwaine anything. No one knew that Vhagar was hiding, off to the side. And and for the people who aren't sure, Rook's Rest wasn't important. The whole idea behind it was that it's right across the bay from Dragonstone. They were trying to draw a dragon out. They were trying to provoke a fight, and Vhagar was just going to jump out and kill presumably whoever they wanted. Hopefully it would be Rhaenyra. That's who they were hoping it was going to be. It wasn't. It was her, her aunt, but it was still the same, more or less, except Aegon screws it up.
Yeah, and it's cool, like, because obviously in season 1, when Vhagar chomps Lucerys's dragon, I mean, it's a young dragon, so it's just like tiny compared to Vhagar.
Yeah.
Here you have Meleys, who is the second biggest dragon on the board, period. And then you still see that Vhagar is double the size.
Besides a cannibal. There's a couple there's a couple other ones that don't really apply, but yes.
Yeah.
And what I thought was really cool about it was that even with like it's really easy to make Vhagar just like it have to be a fight, right? Like it actually has to seem like there's a fight there. And if you don't, like Vagar has, like other dragons have to be faster, maybe. You know, they kind of maybe showed that, like, otherwise they'll make any drama. Vagar's just going to kill everything. So I thought they did a good job of making it, even though clearly it was the superior dragon, it was still a fight. Like, it was still actually, you see, because Rhaenys is a really good fighter. Yeah, she is. She's a veteran. So
she injures Vagar, and I thought it was also really cool. Like, she could have then got away, but she's like, no, we're doing this. Like, and she turned back.
I think she was ready.
And even before that too, I wanted to say, like, the other big kind of change or discrepancy, however you look at it, in the book, it's Rhaenys that does the damage to Aegon and Sunfire, and here Aemond clearly took his shot knowing, and this is kind of what we were talking about last week, like, Aemond is not upset that Aegon showed up because he wants to inflict, and especially since they don't use his younger son Maelor in this show, you kind of also add that aspect that, like, Aemond knows I'm the heir, and then, like, as we talked about a few minutes ago, he knows he's the better option for a king.
Right.
And so it's like in his head, it's like, oh, this is now going to work out even better. And he doesn't hesitate to take that shot.
And we talked about that last week. We were talking about how, it almost sounded like he was provoking Aegon to do something stupid, he was, by telling him, you're too important. You just got to stay here. We'll deal with it. He knew that he was provoking his brother. He did it again in this episode. Would he make a brash decision? And we hinted, like, I think we even talked about this battle. How is it going to play out? Are we actually going to see Aemond be the one, like, that actually hurts? And it wasn't even, like, subtle. Like, clearly Aemond was, I don't care. This is collateral damage at best. At worst, I'm trying to kill my brother. Yeah, and I thought they did a great job. And then, very important point, remember when Cole he races to the king, Aemond's there with his sword out.
He's pulling it out,
2 minutes later, he was probably, hopefully we don't spoil anything for people, you don't really know Aegon's state right now, but Aemond was going to make sure of it, and then when he sees Cole, he puts the sword back. I don't think there's any doubt what he was trying to do.
I mean, did you watch the trailer for next week at all?
Yes.
Yeah, so they kind of spoil, like, the situation with Aegon, but we won't discuss that any further. As you know, Aegon is at least at a minimal fucked up pretty bad.
Yeah, he's not in good shape.
And Sunfire as well is also, which is a huge loss, because when you think about it, the one advantage the Blacks have is the number of dragons, right? The Greens, now they have the best with Vagar, obviously, as you see here in this episode. But other than that, they have Sunfire, and then they have Dreamfire, which is Helena's dragon, but Helena ain't getting in no battle. So take him off the board.
Right.
And then you have Daeron, which is not, I mean, we probably won't see Daeron until season 3. So you probably won't get his dragon.
Yeah.
So it's a big loss for both sides with Rhaenys going down.
Yeah.
And going back to that, talking about, like, the love of the dragon and the rider, when Meleys turns her head as she's getting her neck chewed off, and you could just tell, like, how they put the emotion in those things is, because, I mean, you could tell, like, that dragon was just like, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
Couldn't do this for him.
Yep. And that was it. That was well done. Like I said, my wife kind of yelped when it was actually on Sunfire when Meleys rips into it and starts ripping at its body and wastes away. My wife was like, oh man, like, she felt bad for the dragon, that they just showed a second ago was nuzzling his master. They did such a great job of, I don't want to use the word humanizing, you know what I mean? But, like, they made them characters, which I thought was pretty darn awesome. So yeah, no, I mean, it was surprisingly affecting episode, considering we really don't have too much time with these characters we saw. I mean, really, if you think about it, it's like they're all secondary for the most part. I thought it was just really well done. Ironically, the character, I think, the dragon we know the least about, I'd say, was almost like Vagar, because it's just a gigantic thing that kills everything,
Yeah. I also thought too, like, at first I was like, when Rhaenys fell and then hit the castle, I think it did fade to black, and I was like, is that how they're ending it? Like,
I thought so too.
And then it obviously came back, and then that's when we got the scene with Cole coming up on Aemond.
Yeah.
It still left it on a bit of a cliffhanger there as well. Still.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting too, because there was a very notable description of what happens to Rhaenys. So, like, they all kind of crumble, whatever. The dragons fall, and then when they find Rhaenys, her corpse is blackened, right? She can't even identify or whatever. And I was thinking, like, well, if she fell, that wouldn't really happen. But then you see when it hits the ground, it's almost like the fire and the
Explosion.
dragon. It's an explosion, right? Exactly, and it like takes out half the castle. I thought that was really cool, actually.
Even when Aegon on Sunfire fell, you could see there was like a small fire in that forest.
Right? Yeah, it was just neat. I don't know. It reminded me like it's like World War II planes going down. Like
Yeah.
it was bombers going down. It was very very cool. Yeah, great fight, great episode. Yeah, I mean, it makes you want more. Again, we kind of knew this. There are a lot of battles, obviously, we know are coming, but this is one of the ones that I think is most iconic, just from the histories, really, and that I think a lot of people are looking forward to. And luckily we got it 4 episodes in. So
Yeah, and so I'm curious to ask you, who do you think either side won this conflict in this episode?
I guess you could say the Greens have the slight advantage. Because Rhaenys was like the closest. She was the only one. Again, in Rhaenyra's absence, she was the only one that was really ever talking sense. And she went because she knew she was the only expendable one, and all that. But it's going to have ramifications on her husband, Corlys, who we saw also early in the episode. By the way, people are curious. Those other Alan. Of Driftmark, the other guy, she held his face, said, "Oh, your mother must have been beautiful." She knows that is actually Corlys's bastard son. Mm-hmm. She had that moment where she acknowledged her husband's faults, but now with her out of the picture, it has huge impacts on Corlys and what he does moving forward. So I think the Greens technically win it. Aegon's kind of an idiot having him out of the picture. Either way, isn't necessarily a huge loss. Yeah.
I think the bigger impact is with Rhaenys out of the picture. Rhaenyra's council is now, B squad at best.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Like compared to obviously Aegon is a fool. Did you ever watch Succession?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, you got to watch that show. Anyways, there's a character, Kendall Roy, that I saw people like, dude, Aegon is so Kendall Roy. It was like spot on. But yeah, take Aegon away, like that council. You still got a number of good, again, obviously Otto's not the hand, but he's going to be involved still. And he's sharp. You got Aemon, they are far superior, even though the Blacks still have the dragon count. The Greens have Vhagar, and they have the far superior minds for war.
Exactly. And I think, again, the reason I give them the win simply is, that plan, although it went awry with Aegon showing up, it worked. The original Cole's original plan worked. That's what they got what they wanted. They took up a huge piece off the board. So it's more of a Pyrrhic victory than anything. But yeah, I think the Greens won it.
Yeah, I would agree. But yeah, I can't wait to rewatch it. I thought it was so good. Any last parting thoughts?
I feel like I'm forgetting something that happened in the episode. I should have wrote it down myself. Anything else in your notes?
No, we kind of went through it pretty quickly, but I think we hit all the main points here. I am actually trying to remember. I'm trying to think. I am rereading Fire and Blood now, but I'm not to the dance yet. And I'm trying to think what happens next, and I can't honestly remember.
I do. Yeah. So they are. I will say this: they are moving things around out of necessity. Again, we talked about this. Where do we think the season's going to end? Now I'm less sure now than I was when the season started where it's going to end. I have an idea of where it's going to end, but they're definitely going 3.5 seasons. They have to. But there's still some characters, we haven't really been introduced to. Like you said, we're going to be getting season 3. It just makes me wonder. There's a lot that has to happen, and they have 4 episodes to do it for this season to get to where I think it's going to be. It'd be interesting. You're probably gonna have the next episode, the reaction episode, where see Rhaenyra, upset that she lost her aunt and all this stuff. You're gonna have a lot of that. You're gonna have a lot more of the moving of the armies. There's a ton of movement that's gonna happen now. We still have Daemon. Remember, Daemon's just hanging out in Harrenhal. There's a lot of storytelling there. So, I don't. I kind of know and I kind of don't. Right? It's there's some major events that happen actually in the Narrow Sea that they haven't even hinted at. So.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer they'll go 4 seasons, but it's not going to be 4 full. They've already put this to 8. So like we talked about, maybe 3 is 8 episodes, but I would bet it's more like 7, and then season 4 is 6 or something like that.
Right. I still think the season has to end at the we'll say by the lake. We'll just say that without giving stuff away.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of does it, I guess, for us for the season 4 recap review. Let us know what you think. I hope you guys are all enjoying this as much as Mike and I. Like, I am all in on this show. Every episode, I just last thing. Every episode just makes me wish these guys picked up Game of Thrones. Yeah. Like once like D&D were like, okay, let's just wind this thing up. Like HBO should have pivoted and been like, look, you guys want to roll? Like, that's all good. Like, we got this guy. Right. Another thing too, I forget, season 1, one of the producers was Miguel Sapochnik.
Yeah.
Who directed Battle of the Bastards.
And
what's the other one in the North he directed? Anyways, some of the biggest episodes. And so like, I thought he was a huge component. And when season 1 kind of finished, he announced that he was going to be leaving because he's like, oh, Ryan Condal's and you know, he's the guy. And at first I was like, oh man, I hope this doesn't lose its quality, but it has not at all.
Again, the way they construct scenes, not whether it's a political scene where people are just talking around a table or a battle scene, they put a lot of care and effort into it. And that was one of the things that was missing in Game of Thrones in the later seasons. I saw something pointed out very recently. One of the notorious things about the final season of Game of Thrones is that Rhaegal, Dany's second dragon who's still around, just dies, just flying by and just dies. And it's really stupid. And then Dany's turn at the end doesn't make any sense when the city's, has given up. I saw this really cool thing. Like, a good writer would have just moved the death of Rhaegal to that scene at the end, and if he dies, that's the reason she freaks out. It's like, that's so easy. I feel like a team of good writers sitting down and go, oh, that's clearly the way we do this. But bad writers just rushing through like, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. We don't care about the reasoning or the motivations. We just need it to happen to end the stupid show. You don't get that from these guys at all. I think every single thing they do is incredibly deliberate. In fact, I'm very impressed by the seeds they've been planting early and how they're going to pay off in the long run. I'm actually blown away by it. It's really, really well done.
100%. 100%. All right, guys, let us know what you thought about episode 4. Again, we're sad we're halfway through, but onward we go. And we will see you here next week for the episode 5 recap. Peace out.